Welcome back to the TPS podcast. TPS stands for trillions per second, named after the book. Today we'll discuss the ultimate hacker's protocol. This is going to be an interesting tour of other ancient protocols and why the author picked the Buddhist protocol as the foundation for TPS. Let's get hardcore and dive right in.
We're definitely getting hardcore today. And frankly, this might be the most high-stakes deep dive we've done since the project actually launched.
Yeah, it feels that way.
Right, because we're not just looking at a specific chapter today or like a specific meditation technique. We're looking at the foundational architectural integrity of the entire trillions per second project.
Which is kind of ominous. I mean, architectural integrity usually comes up right before a building collapses or a bridge fails. Are we saying the project is in trouble?
Well, that was the risk, right? We've spent the last few deep dives breaking down the Silicon Sutra and looking at the master lexicon.
The refactoring of enlightenment into simulation theory.
Exactly. And we've basically accepted the premise that C4 Chaos, the author, built this whole grand theory on top of the Buddhist Abhidhamma. But there has always been this lingering question in the background, a sort of elephant in the server room, if you will.
Which is whether the author is just biased.
Precisely. It's what you might call the native code problem. We know from the previous interview and the earlier devlogs that the author's background is heavily steeped in Theravada Buddhism. He spent years in that tradition.
Right, so that is his native language, spiritually speaking.
Yeah, so when he built the TPS project, this massive grand theory of hacking the simulation, he built it on top of the Buddhist Abhidhamma simply because that's what he knew. That was the toolkit he had.
Which makes sense. You build with the tools you have in your belt. If you're a carpenter, everything looks like a nail. And if you're a Buddhist scholar, everything looks like, well, suffering and impermanence.
Right, exactly.
But in a project that claims to be about universal simulation theory, relying on just one tradition, feels like a vulnerability, like a single point of failure.
It does. And in devlog 018, which is our primary source for today's deep dive C4 Chaos, actually admits to a crisis of confidence. And I think this is really important for you listening to grasp. This wasn't just a fleeting thought.
No, he really dug into it.
He realized that just because the Buddhist operating system worked for him, and just because it mapped well to his specific brain, that didn't objectively prove it was the best system for a simulation hacker.
I loved reading this part of the log. It shows a level of intellectual honesty you don't always see in spiritual or philosophical projects.
But you really don't.
Usually people pick a lane, right? They're a Stoic or a Christian or a Buddhist, and then they spend the rest of their lives just aggressively defending that lane. But he explicitly asked himself, am I just using the Buddhist OS because I'm comfortable with it, or is it actually the superior architecture?
And that is a very dangerous question to ask about your own life's work.
Seriously.
Imagine if the answer came back no. Imagine if he found out that, say, Hermeticism or Taoism was actually the better code base for simulation hacking.
It would invalidate the entire architecture of the TPS project. He'd have to tear it down to the studs.
So he risked toppling the whole stack. But instead of just wondering about it or, asking his friends who would probably just echo his own thoughts, he decided to audit the code. And he didn't go to a priest and he didn't go to a guru.
You went to the digital synths.
The digital synths.
I love that term so much. It sounds like an 80s synth pop band, but he's referring to the AI models. He decided to red team his own project using the most advanced large language models available. So we're talking Google's Gemini, xAI's Grok, and OpenAI's ChatGPT.
It's a brilliant move, and it ties right back to the centaur concept we've discussed in previous deep dives. The idea is that human cognition is always biased by culture and emotion and personal history.
Right, we can't escape our own context.
But an AI, specifically a frontier large language model, has ingested the sum total of human knowledge. Every religious text, every coding manual, every philosophy book ever digitized, and it holds them in a sort of neutral, high-dimensional suspension.
So by feeding his criteria into these three independent intelligences, he was looking for a consensus that wasn't colored by tradition or lineage or his own personal preference.
Exactly. He wanted a cold, hard technical audit.
But wait, isn't there a risk here too? I mean, LLMs are known to hallucinate or just be sycophantic. If you just ask ChatGPT, tell me why Buddhism is great, it's going to write you a glowing poem about lotuses and mindfulness. How did he ensure this wasn't just a confirmation bias machine?
That's the genius of the prompt. He didn't ask, is Buddhism the best? He didn't even mention Buddhism in the prompt initially.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he established a set of neutral engineering-based criteria. He basically said, here are the specs for the ultimate hacker's protocol. Evaluate the world's ancient wisdom traditions against these specific specs and rank them.
So he blinded the jury, essentially. He hid the defendant's name and just asked them to look at the raw evidence.
Precisely. And the goal was simple: to determine objectively if the ancient Buddhist protocol is truly the best operating system for a simulation hacker, or if there is a superior patch out there.
And I have to say, the vibe of this devlog isn't like a philosophy seminar. It reads like a breaking news report or a system administrator looking at a server log after a massive stress test. The results they are unanimous and they are fascinating.
They really are. But before we get to the winner, and I think longtime listeners might have a guess who took the crown, we have to look at the rules of the game. Let's unpack these specs because they really define what this ultimate hacker's protocol is supposed to actually do.
Right, the evaluation criteria.
The first criterion is simulation metaphors. This goes back to the core problem TPS is trying to solve. Most ancient wisdom traditions were written for agricultural societies. We're talking about the Bronze Age, the Iron Age.
Right, we've joked about this before. Phrases like planting seeds of merit or rooting out attachment or the harvest of karma, it's very pastoral. It smells like dirt and rain.
Exactly. It's all farming metaphors. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It worked perfectly for people living in 500 BC whose entire lives revolve around the seasons and the soil. But if you are a digital native living today, those metaphors create friction. You have to translate them in your head before you can actually apply them. When you hear seed, you have to pause and think execution trigger. When you hear harvest, you have to translate that to compiled output.
It's like trying to run code written in Latin. It might work eventually, but the compile time is terrible. You're wasting CPU cycles just translating the user interface.
Precisely. So the first criterion for the audit was how cleanly does the ancient wisdom map to modern computer science, virtualization, and physics. It's not enough for the protocol to be poetic or comforting. It needs to natively understand the digital nature of reality.
The devlog mentions specifically that the system needs to understand discrete time processing. Let's break that down because that sounds like some heavy computer science jargon.
It is, but it's crucial for the simulation framework. Think about a movie. When you watch a movie, it looks like a continuous, smooth flow of motion, right?
Right.
But we know that technically it's just 24 still images flashing per second. It's discrete. It's broken up into distinct chunks.
Voxels, frames, pixels, updating one by one.
Exactly. Simulation theory posits that our reality works the exact same way. We aren't living in a continuous analog wave. We are living in a digital reality that refreshes trillions of times per second. That's literally the TPS in the title.
Trillions per second.
Yes. So the question the author posed to the AI panel was, does this religion view the world as a solid, continuous flow like a river? Or does it understand that reality is granular? Does it understand refresh rates? Does it understand that what looks like a smooth video is actually trillions of individual frames rendering one after another?
So we're looking for a physics engine, not a gardening manual. We need a system that understands the actual refresh rate of the universe.
Correct. The best protocol must function like a physics engine. It needs to describe the mechanics of the simulation, the rendering process itself, not just the morality of the player inside the game. If the protocol thinks the world is solid matter, it's already wrong about the underlying physics.
That brings us to the second criterion, which I think is my favorite because it feels the most rebellious. It's called root access, or the active developer.
This is the fundamental distinction between a conventional religion and a hacker protocol. Most religious systems treat the human being as a passive entity.
An NPC, a non-player character.
Exactly. In a traditional religious context, you are running a read-only script. You have a destiny or a fate, or you are submitting to a higher power's plan. If something goes wrong, if the system crashes or you get a virus, what are you supposed to do? You pray.
You submit a support ticket to the sysadmin. Dear God, please fix this bug. Dear universe, please align my chakras. You're fundamentally waiting for someone else to do the heavy lifting.
Right. You are asking for an external intervention. You are explicitly admitting you don't have the permissions to fix the code yourself. But the active developer criterion asks a different question. Does the framework empower the user to fix the code themselves?
It's the difference between asking for help on a forum and just opening the command line yourself.
That's it. Does the protocol give you the syntax to rewrite your own reactions? Does it locate the specific line of code where anger or greed is being compiled? And does it give you the permission, the root access, to delete that line and write a new one?
This is a huge shift in perspective. Most people think spirituality is about following rules. You're saying this criterion looks for a system that lets you rewrite the rules of your own mind.
We want a manual that teaches you how to code, not a manual that tells you how to beg the developer for a patch. We're looking for absolute agency. We're looking for a protocol that hands the keyboard to the user and says, here, you drive. If you can't edit the script, you aren't a hacker. You're just a user trapped in the GUI.
I love that. And finally, the third criterion is trench utility.
This is the reality check. It asks, is this pragmatic? Can you use it when the system is actually on fire?
Because we've all met those people who are incredibly well-read in philosophy. They can quote Hegel or Kant or the Upanishads chapter and verse. They seem so calm and wise in the library, but then someone cuts them off in traffic.
And they completely lose it. The system crashes immediately. That is a failure of trench utility.
Macro-level theory is totally useless if you still scream at your kids because you're tired after work.
Exactly. A hacker's protocol needs to be more than just a theoretical physics textbook. It needs to be a fire extinguisher. It needs to provide instant debug tools for the daily friction of existence, the trauma, the stress, the annoyance, the petty stuff.
Right.
If it works in the monastery but fails in a traffic jam, it fails this criterion entirely. It needs to be low latency and high availability.
It's the difference between knowing the path and walking the path to, quote, the matrix.
Right.
But in this digital context, it's the difference between knowing the source code and being able to deploy a hotfix in a live production environment.
Spot on. So those are the core specs. Simulation metaphors, root access, and trench utility. That is a very specific, very modern, and very rigorous filter to put these ancient traditions through.
So C4 Chaos feeds these specs into Gemini Grok and ChatGPT. He sets up the AI panel.
And remember the inherent risk here. He is effectively asking the digital jury to deliberate on his life's work. He speculated in the devlog, what if the AIs came back and said, actually, based on these strict criteria, Hermeticism is the superior code.
Or Christianity, or Islam, or secular humanism.
If that had happened, he would have had to admit that TPS was built on a suboptimal foundation. He would have been holding the wrong manual all this time. It would have been a massive blow to the project's integrity. He would be the guy selling you a sleek new Linux distro that's actually just running Windows 95 underneath.
That would be a marketing nightmare. But honestly, it'd be an existential nightmare for him personally. But thankfully, that didn't happen.
No, the consensus was absolute.
Let's reveal the results. Because this isn't just a philosophy discussion, as the log says, it's an audit report.
The audit was a complete landslide. All three models, Gemini Grok and ChatGPT, independently ranked the exact same protocol as number one.
And I have to quote Grok here, because the personality of these AIs is something we'll discuss a bit later, but Grok's reaction was just perfect. Grok literally said TPS protocol is solid AF.
Solid AF. You don't usually get that kind of phrasing in a peer-reviewed journal.
You really don't.
Mm-hmm.
But seriously, the significance of three completely different training stacks arriving at the exact same conclusion is wild.
It's not a glitch. It's a very clear signal. These models have ingested the sum total of human knowledge. They know every religious text, every philosophical treatise, every computer science manual. For all three to align on this specific hierarchy suggests that there's an objective structural reality to these criteria.
It validates the author's initial architectural choices not as a personal bias, but as optimal engineering.
Precisely.
So let's talk about the champion. The unanimous number one across all three AIs with a perfect or near-perfect score of 10 out of 10, Buddhism, specifically the Abhidhamma.
The Abhidhamma. And we need to be very clear here. The AIs didn't pick Buddhism in the vague cultural sense. They didn't pick the statues and the incense and the chanting. They picked the Abhidhamma, which is the hardcore, specific, psychological and philosophical system underlying the religion.
For you listening who maybe hasn't read the Silicon Sutra episodes or isn't a Buddhist scholar, what is the Abhidhamma exactly? Is it a single book or a sutra?
It's one of the three baskets of the Pali Canon. So you have the suttas, which are the sermons. Those are the stories of the Buddha talking to people using conventional language. Then you have the Vinaya, which are the behavioral rules for the monks.
The code of conduct.
Right. And then you have the Abhidhamma. Abhi means higher or meta, and Dhamma means teaching or reality. It's the meta reality. It completely strips away the stories, the people, the places, and just lists the raw microscopic components of mind and matter.
It's basically the source code documentation for the universe.
Exactly. It's a giant, hyper-detailed spreadsheet of psychological states and physical elements.
Okay, so why did this specific text absolutely win the simulation metaphor criterion? What made it technical enough to convince a neural network that it was basically a physics engine?
Let's look at the simulation metaphor criterion again. The Abhidhamma explicitly describes reality not as a solid state, but as a stream of mind moments.
The discrete events.
Trillions of them per second, literally. The ancient texts say that in the blink of an eye, billions of mind moments arise and pass away. It describes existence as a rapid-fire sequence of cause and effect data packets. This is a flawless match for SIM theory.
It's describing a refresh rate. It's describing voxels turning on and off.
Yes, it doesn't use agrarian metaphors. It uses digital ones, even though it was written 2,500 years ago.
That is mind-blowing.
It treats the world as pure data. It doesn't say you are an angry person. It says there's a packet of anger data arising at this specific coordinate in the mind stream, persisting for exactly 17 moments and then dissolving. That is a programmatic view of the self. It deconstructs the user into a series of momentary events.
But where it really crushed the competition was in the trench utility and root access categories. The AIs identified a specific tool mentioned in the logs, Vipassana.
That is the killer app of the whole protocol.
We've talked about Vipassana before, usually translated as insight meditation. But in this context, the AI audit called it a packet sniffer.
That is such a brilliant modern analogy. For those who know network security, a packet sniffer like Wireshark allows you to monitor the raw traffic moving across a network. You can see the pure data packets before they get rendered into a web page or a video.
So Vipassana is Wireshark for your mind.
Precisely. Most of us, most of the time, are just looking at the fully rendered website. We feel sadness, we feel anger, we see the finished product on the screen. We are trapped in the user interface.
Right, we just experience the emotion after it's fully loaded.
But Vipassana trains the user to intercept the raw data packets, the physical sensations, the initial spark of contact before they render as emotional suffering.
That is the debug tool. You're catching the corrupted data, the craving, the aversion, while it's still just a tiny packet of tension in the body.
And because you catch it early, you stop the lag. You stop the suffering from fully loading and taking over your system. That is trench utility of the highest order. It's not about sitting around analyzing why you were sad 5 hours later. It's about seeing the sadness packet hit the router and deleting it before it executes.
So you aren't psychoanalyzing yourself at all. You are doing live network monitoring.
Correct. You are watching the traffic in real time. Oh, here comes a high latency packet of anxiety. Delete. Here comes a malware packet of jealousy. Delete. You keep the bandwidth clear.
And what about root access? The audit mentioned something called the Jivana moment. I want to dig into this because this feels like the most technical and critical part of the TPS protocol.
This is deep technical Abhidhamma, and the fact that the AIs picked up on it is super impressive. The Jivana moments are a specific sequence of mind moments in the cognitive process.
Walk me through that. What is the cognitive process here?
So the Abhidhamma breaks down a single thought which takes a microsecond into 17 distinct sub-moments. It's incredibly granular. It maps the exact lifespan of a single packet of consciousness.
17 frames per thought.
Right. The first few moments are just receiving the raw data. The eye sees a color, the ear hears a sound. That's pure input.
Read only. You can't change that.
Exactly. Then there are moments of determining. Your mind figures out what the object is. Oh, that's my phone ringing. But then moments 9 through 15 are the Jivana stage. Jivana translates to impulsion or running. This is the precise microsecond where the mind runs the script of your reaction.
So that's where the karma is actually generated.
That is the right access logic gate. Everything before the Jivana moment is just result. It's the fruit of past karma. You cannot change the input. But the Jivana, that is where you decide how to process it. That is where you decide to react with kindness or anger, greed, or generosity.
So the protocol identifies the exact line of code, the exact microsecond where you have free will, where you can override the default script.
Exactly. Most people are NPCs because they let the Jivana moments run on autopilot. They just react out of blind habit. Insult happens, anger script runs, they never intervene.
They just let the malware install itself over and over.
The Abhidhamma gives you the specific tool to hack that exact gate. The AIs saw this and said, this is it. This is true root access.
It's not just an app, it's the kernel.
It's the bare metal kernel of the operating system. It allows you to modify the source code of your personality in real time, frame by frame.
Amazing. So Buddhism takes the gold medal because it perfectly understands the hardware with its simulation metaphor and gives you the highest level of administrative privileges with root access.
Yes.
But it wasn't the only protocol that got high marks. The audit was thorough and there was a very strong runner-up.
There was. And honestly, this was one of the most practical takeaways from the entire audit. The runner-up, consistently ranked number 2 or number 3, was Stoicism.
Stoicism, the philosophy of Marcus Aurelius Seneca Epictetus,
Yeah.
the absolute favorite of Silicon Valley right now.
And the AIs, especially Grok and ChatGPT, absolutely loved Stoicism. They called it the ultimate daily driver or DevOps tool. Grok actually gave it a 9.7 out of 10.
That's incredibly close to the Abhidhamma. Why did it score so high? If Buddhism is the bare metal kernel, what is Stoicism in this tech metaphor?
Stoicism is the firewall.
The firewall. Okay,
Well,
explain how that works.
think about the absolute core teaching of Stoicism, the dichotomy of control.
Right. Some things are up to us, some things are not up to us.
In tech terms, the AIs translated this as an access control list, or ACL.
An access control list.
You have specific permissions as a user. You have zero right access to external servers. You cannot control other people. You cannot control the weather. You cannot control the global economy. Those are external servers. If you try to write code to them, if you try to force them to change to your preferences, you will get an error message.
You get system latency, lag, the spinning beach ball of death, but in your mind.
Exactly. You generate frustration. But you have absolute root access over your local reactions. That is what the Stoics call prohairesis, your reasoned choice.
So Stoicism is basically a security protocol that blocks you from trying to hack servers you don't have permission for.
And it protects your local drive from incoming malware. If someone insults you, that's an incoming malicious data packet. A non-Stoic lets that packet write in, executes it, and gets a virus called rage. A Stoic firewall sees it and says, this is external data. It does not have permission to execute code on my emotional drive. Block. Delete.
That is incredibly useful. It sounds much faster than the Abhidhamma.
It is faster in the moment, and this is exactly why it scored so incredibly high on Trench utility. The audit made a really great point here. Buddhism is deep-level memory defragmentation. It's fixing the core. It's neurosurgery. But sometimes you don't have time for a deep defrag.
Right. When the system is on fire at 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday and your boss is screaming at you, you can't just sit down cross-legged and do 45 minutes of Vipassana to observe the rise and fall of the screaming.
You don't have the bandwidth for that. You need a quick script to rate limit your anxiety instantly. That is Stoicism. It's a lightweight production-grade tool for keeping the system stable under heavy load.
And this led to a really cool suggestion from ChatGPT in the logs. It suggested a stacked build.
The ultimate hacker build.
I love this idea. You don't have to choose just one religion or philosophy like picking a team. You're a sysadmin. You use the tools that work for the specific task.
Exactly. So the build ChatGPT proposed is you run Stoicism as your front-end UI.
That handles your daily social interactions, dealing with your boss, the traffic, the daily noise of the world.
It's your interface layer. It keeps you calm and functional in the world. It prevents you from crashing when external servers act up. But then you run Buddhism, specifically the TPS Abhidhamma protocol, as your back-end kernel.
For the deep processing.
For the deep insight. For understanding the nature of the simulation itself. For achieving that zero lag state we talk about. Stoicism manages the incoming traffic, and Buddhism refactors the core code.
Stoicism keeps the bugs out, while Buddhism cleans the code within. That makes perfect sense.
It's a incredibly powerful combination, and it totally validates why so many people in the tech space are drawn to both traditions. They complement each other perfectly.
So we have our champion in Buddhism and our runner-up in Stoicism. But the audit looked at a whole field of ancient protocols. The author threw everything at the AIs to see what stuck. There were some other very interesting rankings.
There were, and the tech metaphors the AIs use for these other traditions are just hilarious, but deeply insightful.
Let's talk about Taoism. It came in at number 3 on the list.
Taoism, the philosophy of the way. The tech metaphor the synths used here was thermodynamic alignment.
Thermodynamic alignment.
Think about the core Taoist concept of wu-wei, effortless action.
Doing without doing.
In a physics engine, friction generates heat. Heat is inefficiency. If you are fighting the simulation, you are generating heat. You are burning CPU cycles unnecessarily. Taoism is the art of operating the avatar in read-only mode regarding the flow of events. You are gliding through the physics engine without generating any heat.
You're surfing the flux perfectly, just riding the wave of the simulation.
You aren't trying to overwrite the river, you're just floating with it. It's highly efficient energy management. The reason it missed the #1 spot, according to the audit, was that it's perhaps a little less granular in its debugging tools than the Abhidhamma.
How so?
Well, if you ask a Taoist how to fix chronic anger, they might say, be like water, which is true and profound. But if you ask the Abhidhamma, it says anger is composed of these 4 specific mental factors arising at this exact frequency caused by this specific sense contact.
Ah, so Taoism is more art, while the Abhidhamma is pure engineering.
Correct. Taoism is a feel player. Abhidhamma is a syntax player. But Taoism is still a very high-ranking protocol for its sheer efficiency.
Then we have Zen Buddhism. Now, isn't Zen just a flavor of Buddhism? Why did the audit treat it as a separate protocol?
Because the methodology, the actual user experience, is completely different. The AI is called Zen kernel panic or stack overflow.
That sounds like a bad thing. A kernel panic is when your computer screen goes black and tells you to manually restart.
In a normal computer, yes, it's a fatal error. But in the quest for enlightenment, it's a deliberate strategy.
How is crashing your own system a strategy?
Think about a Zen koan, like what is the sound of one hand clapping? Or show me your original face before your parents were born.
These are famously unanswerable questions. They make absolutely no sense logically.
Exactly. They are paradoxes specifically designed to target the logical mind, the GUI, and overload it. The intellect tries to solve them, spins up to 100% CPU usage, gets stuck in an infinite loop, and then crash.
The blue screen of death for the ego.
Exactly. The logic centers literally burn out, and the system is forced to reboot into raw data mode. That sudden reboot is what Zen calls satori, sudden awakening.
So Zen is a brute force attack on your own logic circuits to force a hard reset.
It's incredibly aggressive, it's high impact. But as a daily diagnostic tool, it can be a little destabilizing. That's why it ranked lower than the systematic step-by-step approach of the Abhidhamma. You can't necessarily use a koan to fix your stress in a budget meeting. What is the sound of one client complaining? It just doesn't work as well as the stoic firewall for trench utility.
That makes total sense. What about Gnosticism? This one is really popular in the red pill corners of the internet.
Gnosticism. The AIs labeled this one the jailbreak.
The jailbreak. Like hacking an iPhone to install unapproved apps.
Gnosticism views the physical world as a literal prison. It believes the material world is a closed-loop sandbox built by a buggy, malicious creator called the Demiurge.
The architect in the Matrix, basically.
Exactly. The goal in Gnosticism isn't to optimize the system or find peace within it. It's to exfiltrate data, to get the gnosis, the secret knowledge, and escape the simulation entirely.
The audit gave this points for motivation.
Yes. It's fantastic for red pill motivation. It wakes you up to the fact that the system might be rigged against you. It questions the admin. But for trench utility, it's actually terrible.
Why is that?
Because if you fundamentally hate the system, if you think the world is an evil prison, you are going to generate massive amounts of aversion. You're going to be miserable. It offers very few tools for actually debugging your daily life. It just tells you to escape. It's like hating the video game you're playing. You're still playing it. You're just having a terrible time.
So it's high concept, but low functionality day to day.
Precisely. And finally, we should mention Tantra or Vajrayana.
The overclocking protocol.
This is the dangerous one. The metaphor the synths used here is malware repurposing.
Repurposing the malware. That sounds incredibly risky.
It is. In Theravada Buddhism, the Abhidhamma, you try to delete the virus. You isolate and delete greed. You delete anger. You purify the system. In Tantra, you take that virus, that intense energy of desire or passion, and you actively use it as fuel.
You burn the virus to power the CPU.
It's high voltage. It's extremely high risk. If you do it right, you get results incredibly fast. You overclock the system to enlightenment. You turn the poison into medicine. But if you do it wrong, you fry the motherboard.
You crash hard and potentially ruin your hardware.
And the logs mention that the TPS project actually borrows some patches from this tradition, specifically the staging environment or the Bardo states to explain what happens after a physical system crash like death. So it's part of the broader stack, but not the core kernel. It's an advanced user tool.
This is such a comprehensive breakdown. It really shows that C4 Chaos wasn't just throwing darts at a board or relying on his childhood religion. There's a deep structural logic to why TPS is built the way it is.
It's an engineered solution. It's not about what feels warm and fuzzy. It's about what executes cleanly.
I want to pivot briefly to the digital jury themselves, the AI personalities. Because reading the logs, it wasn't just dry tabular data. These models had distinct voices.
It was fascinating to see the personality of the models emerge, even though we know they're technically just predicting the next token. It really felt like a diverse panel of human experts arguing in a room.
Gemini was the professor.
Very academic, precise structured. It focused heavily on the translation aspect, the Rosetta Stone angle. It wanted to make sure the definitions of ancient words matched the modern tech terms perfectly. It was the one double-checking the citations.
And ChatGPT was the synthesizer.
It was the diplomat.
Yeah.
It proposed the stacked build. It tried to find a way for all the protocols to work together in harmony. It saw the ecosystem. It didn't want to just pick a winner and discard the rest. It wanted to build a cohesive team.
And then there was Grok.
Grok, the programmer, the cyberpunk enthusiast.
I have to read some of these quotes again because they are incredible. TPS protocol is solid AF, God tier, based, hell yeah, root user.
It's hilarious, but it also speaks to a very specific demographic. Grok represents the native habitat of the modern hacker. It didn't just analyze the text, it vibed with it. It felt like chatting with a frantic coder on Discord at 3 a.m.
It highlighted Grok's specific praise of stoicism as production-grade emotional DevOps.
Which is such a perfect description. But the real key takeaway here isn't just that the AIs have funny simulated voices. It's the underlying consensus, despite those voices.
Right, the agreement across the board.
You have the academic in Gemini, the diplomat in ChatGPT, and the hacker in Grok. 3 totally different personalities, 3 different training data sets, 3 different underlying architectures, and yet they all flawlessly agreed on the exact same hierarchy. Abhidhamma, first Stoicism, second Taoism, third.
That validation is huge. It proves that the author's initial choice to build TPS on the Abhidhamma wasn't just a personal quirk or native code bias. It was mathematically the optimal engineering choice.
It wasn't bias, it was best practices.
So what does this mean for you listening? We've audited the code, the AIs have signed off, the architecture is sound.
Yeah.
What's the final verdict?
The verdict is that the TPS protocol, this massive refactoring of the Abhidhamma into simulation theory, is objectively confirmed as the ultimate hacker's protocol.
It is the only one with a live packet sniffer in Vipassana.
And it is the only one that identifies the precise right access moment in the Jivana logic gate. It gives you the deepest possible level of control over your own mind. It's not just handling the inputs, it's rewriting the core processing logic.
But the practical application is key here. You don't have to be a monk to use this. You don't have to shave your head and move to a cave in the Himalayas.
No, you should be a full-stack engineer. That's the modern application of this ancient tech.
The stacked build.
Use the stacked build. Don't throw away Stoicism just because it came in second place. Use it as your firewall. Use it to handle your finances, the daily news cycle. Protect your local drive from the noise of the internet.
But don't stop there.
Right, don't stop at the firewall. If you only use Stoicism, you're safe, but you're not free. You're just a hardened NPC taking less damage. Use the TPS kernel, the deep Buddhist insight for your core processing. Use it to understand that the self is just a rootkit. Use it to see the flux. Use it to achieve zero lag.
It's a complete end-to-end system.
It's the ultimate build for a modern human living in a high-speed digital simulation.
I love it. We've gone from a crisis of confidence to a fully audited, AI-verified system architecture. It feels like the project has really matured with this devlog.
The terminal is finally open. The manual has been audited by the best intelligences we have. The native bias has been neutralized. The only thing left to do is execute the code.
That is the final provocation for you. We spend so much time looking for the perfect system. We shop around in the spiritual marketplace endlessly. Maybe I'll try crystals. Maybe I'll try yoga. Maybe I'll try a new meditation app.
We stay stuck in the analysis paralysis loop. We keep reading the documentation over and over because we're afraid to open the terminal. We're afraid to actually type sudo delete attachment and hit enter.
But the audit is done. The results are in. We know what works.
So the question for you listening is simple. Are you going to keep running on a legacy OS with known vulnerabilities, the anxiety, the stress, the constant crashing? Or are you ready to install the patch?
The download link is in your mind. We've audited the code, and the system is green. Happy hacking, and see you in the Flux.
See you in the Flux.